This is Aaron Hops from the Rhinebeck School of Music, and I've had a lot of students come to me lately wondering how to play across the fretboard, learning scales and notes all across the fretboard. Because as beginner musicians, especially soloists, you tend to learn one pattern from the root position and you kind of stick around that pattern, you don't really go much further. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about the CAGED system and what that means and how to learn all of your chords, your scales, and your arpeggios and your triads over D major. Now when I was learning guitar, I didn't learn it this way. I did not learn this system. My teacher was, I studied a lot of jazz, so everything I did was more about, seventh chords and seventh arpeggios, but this is sort of like a good nuts and bolts, like learning your basic triads, roots and thirds and fifths across the fretboard. And I always learned the chord is the scale is the arpeggio, and that is something that just stuck in my head, even to this day. And it's true, if you know the chord shape, then you can derive the arpeggio, because all an arpeggio is a broken chord. You can derive the triads out of that, because all triads are just little three note chord shapes, right? So you can break everything up into threes and you get your triads. And then your scale layers over top of that, and everything fits kind of like hand in glove over these positions. All right, so what is the CAGED system? Well, you have a C chord, you have an A chord, you have a G chord, you have an E chord, and you have a D chord, and that spells CAGED, right? So it's taking these shapes, like if you have a C in this open position, you can move that all around the fretboard, right? So if it's here, it's C, over here it's D, now I'm going up to E, F, G, A, right? I can move that anywhere, and it's that C shape, right, that I'm moving around. Now what if I take the A shape? Same thing. Here's A, there's A sharp, there's B, there's C, D, E, F. You can move that shape around. The E shape just becomes this bar chord, right? Here's my G, here's my A, here's my B, here's my C. I can move that around. And my G shape, so that one's a little, it's a little bit harder to move around, but I'm going to show you some more usable ways to use that chord. And then your D shape, of course, when you move that around, you can move your D chord around. All right, so if you connect these all in one position on the fretboard, so CAGED is just kind of like an easy way to take shapes you already know and connect them across the fretboard in a logical way. And it's always going to spell CAGED. That's always going to be the order. So if I have a C shape off of this D root here, this is a D major chord now, right? All right, so there's my C shape. If I build an A shape, D bar chord off of that, that's my next position on the fretboard. Find my next D here and play a G shape, then that's my my G shape. If I find off the same root my E shape, right? You see how I'm playing and connecting these chords all across the fretboard, and last but not least, I have this D chord here. And then I'm back to my original position an octave higher, which was here, right? So I have C shape, A shape, G shape, E shape, D shape, and then back to C shape if you want. And what does that spell? CAGED, right? C, A, G, E, D. That's CAGED. Okay? So, memorizing that order and those shapes, like you should probably know if you play bar chords, this shape and this shape, and everybody knows the D shape from the open position. So maybe like, this one might be a little tricky if you've never used it, but just think Under the Bridge by the Chili Peppers. First chord is that. And this G shape, which of course, like nobody really plays a G chord like that around the neck, but I'll show you why, how to use it. All right, so now that you know the chord shapes, we can take the chords and make them into triads. So if I break up this particular shape here, right, into threes, I have the D chord everybody knows, this shape, and that shape. So these are all my triads over that one chord shape. I just took it and I split it into groupings of three across the fretboard like that. All right, now I'm going to do the same thing in the next position. All right, there's my D shape. I'm going to take 3 notes, 3 notes. Now this one, if I took these 3 though, that would just be a power chord, root and fifth and octave, so I have to make the third over here. So that position and then another root, and I've got all my triads off of that. It's kind of like a blend between this shape and the next shape, the G shape, right? So if you look at these two shapes together, they kind of overlap over these two triad shapes, right? So that's your next positioning, okay? Now the next one, you're going to take this bar chord D, break it into threes, and again the last one, if you just did this, that's just your normal power chord, so you got to put the third in there, right? Back to your original shape that you played down here. So those are your triads. Your arpeggio is just taking that shape and breaking it up. Because all an arpeggio is a broken chord. So if you take this one, you'd have to put that F sharp in there. Again, like using this shape as well, this G shape, like that's a little bit easier to grab sometimes. So you could play that arpeggio in 2 different ways, like that, or you could play it like that. And then you have this one. To your original one. So those are your arpeggios, breaking up the chords. So you have triads, you have arpeggios, and then the next thing to do is learn your scale positions over top of each of those shapes, right? So associate, this is the chord, this is the scale, this is the arpeggio, right? The next one, this is the chord. The scale off of that would be this one. And it kind of, again, overlaps with this one, which is the G shape. Fits really nicely over that shape, and this one is more over this one. All right, so that's your scale. And then, the chord is the scale, is your arpeggio. And then this position here, there's the scale pattern that goes over that one. And then, of course, your arpeggio. Okay. And then, last but not least, you could play this one this way too, kind of going more across, and then this one. And then you're back to your other position. So if you practice that stuff, then it starts to come out in your playing. If somebody's playing in D, right? Now, like, you've got all these positions that you can find. And that's all in D. So that's a good place to start. You want to sort of play around in one key for a while to get comfortable with that, and then you want to start breaking out and trying other keys and playing over chord progressions with this stuff, because eventually, like, if someone had like a 1, 4, 5, just like a D, right, to a 4, to a 5, and then back to the 1. Then you'd have all these chords. Trying these different triads out and how each one sounds. And then you've also got your scale position within that, you know. And then you see how everything kind of fits together. And then you can play them in different positions on the fretboard and all of that. So it's a process for sure, and that's a lot to learn, but I would recommend for any beginners, if you're just starting out, really sit with one position every week. You know, don't take on too much, don't learn the whole thing at once, because that's just going to be overwhelming. And sit with one key for a long time before you start trying to break out into other keys and more complicated things. Alright, so I'll be posting more about the CAGED system in later lessons and talking about connecting the chords and the scales and the arpeggios and different exercises you can do. But I hope you found this helpful. If you haven't already, visit www.rhinebeckschoolofmusic.com and subscribe. Become a patron, patreon.com/rhinebeckschoolofmusic. See you at the next one.